Okay, my name is Marissa Morgan and I did my Vulnerable Populations group on grandparents raising their grandchildren. So a little profile and background for this population group. Over the last decade or so, the number of grandparents raising their grandchildren has grown substantially. In the year 2000, nearly 2.4 million grandparents claimed primary responsibility for a co-resident grandchild. Grandparents who raise their grandchildren are at a vulnerable state, as well as their grandchildren. When there are problems with marriages, jobs, money, single parents, etc., the main turning point for parents is to send their children to their parents or the children's grandparents. This population is vulnerable, for one, because of the increased age of the grandparents. Usually they are not able to do what they were when they were younger and raising their own children. Now they have more health problems of their own and they are faced with raising children again. Grandparents who are caregivers suffer higher rates of activity limitations, chronic conditions, and poor subjective well-being. The grandchildren are at an increased risk because they may have very likely suffered some sort of abuse from their parents, neglect, some sort of instability, or a death of one of their parents, or both. When these things or behaviors are added together, there is an increased chance of behavioral problems from the grandchildren. Okay, so the size of this population. In 2018, the News for Utah did a segment on grandfamilies, which is a term for these grandchildren being raised by their grandparents, and stated that more than 1 million grandparents are responsible for their grandchildren. They related a great deal of that to the rate of opioid use in Utah, which is one of the highest in the nation. In the United States, there was said to be over 2.4 million grandparents raising their grandchildren in just the year 2000, so that number has only grown. Some statistics have shown that up to 3 million now. Some contributing factors. Like I stated above, Good for Utah did a news piece that stated that one of the largest contributing factors to the grandfamilies was opioid abuse. Some barriers to the social determinants of health may be available of resources to meet daily needs. This could be because grandparents physically can't help their grandchildren with all their needs because of their own illnesses and setbacks. It could also be access to educational, economic, and job opportunities. This factor was brought up many times during my research as a contributing factor as to why the grandchildren must go live with their grandparents in the first place. There could also be a barrier in the social support and social norms aspects. The grandparents or grandchildren may not get the support they need from the community and others around them because of the situations that they are in. Some specific contributing factors that may affect this population may be judgments from others due to the situation, and grandchildren raised by grandparents are said to be at greater risk of emotional and behavioral problems than children in general, just raised by their parents. The root cause of this health group. The root cause is that for some reason parents are unable to raise and care for their children. This may be due to drug or alcohol abuse, death of the parents, health reasons, financial reasons, lack of resources or jobs, etc. The Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I think the tiers and the met-unmet status really depends on the age of the grandchildren. If the child starts out with their grandparents from a young age, they may have more met needs, depending on the grandparents. But if the grandchild goes with the grandparents in their teenage years, they may have more unmet standards on the tiers. If more of the needs are met, they will have a better overall functional level. And if the grandchildren start with their grandparents at a younger age, they would most likely have a healthier overall lifestyle. Some specific health concerns for communicable and non-communicable diseases. There was not much research or information on this topic for the grandparents raising the grandchildren relationships, but there was a lot of research on how it causes increased stress on the grandparents, which can put them at greater risk for diseases. Grandparents who raise grandchildren are at risk for increased stress concerns, which can lead to diseases and other behavioral issues. Grandparents are more vulnerable to physical and mental health challenges. Grandchildren are at a greater risk for behavioral problems. Risk for harm by or to others. Grandchildren, when raised by their grandparents, have an increased risk to have more behavioral problems than those raised by their parents. This can cause the potential to have risk for harm to themselves or to others. And here are my references.